marriage teaches us one thing, it is that we suck at communicating. Connecting and growing with our spouse calls us to learn a type of communication that must be developed and nurtured. Marriage invites us to have emotionally mature and personally responsible conversations, and that requires character development. Join me as I share with you the 5 signs that indicate your communication needs work and how to do that work. Hi, I'm Julia Woods, couples coach and a wife of over 3 decades. I am passionate about helping couples develop their ability to lead life-giving conversations where both spouses feel seen and heard. Because when a couple can do that, there is nothing they cannot accomplish together. If you want that, make sure you click that subscribe button under this video so you don't miss out on future episodes that can help you do just that. If you feel like you suck at communication, please know there is nothing wrong with you. You aren't missing something. Others weren't born with something that you weren't. Being a life-giving communicator, no matter how difficult a conversation, is something that each spouse chooses to develop. And in 10 years of coaching spouses, I have not found one who couldn't grow their emotional maturity and personal responsibility to lead life-giving conversations. It starts with them looking at the communication behaviors they are choosing that are blocking life-giving conversations and then shifting them. Let's talk about the 5 habits of poor communicators and how they can shift. The first habit of a poor communicator is you interrupt your spouse when they are talking. We are either listening to learn and grow or listening to prove and protect in every conversation. Life-giving communication occurs as you learn and discover about your spouse and how they see the world. When you interrupt, it's a sign that you are focused on proving and protecting what you have decided you think you know, rather than listening to learn something about your spouse. When you interrupt your spouse, it's a sign that you aren't open to considering a different thought than what you think. You are cutting them off so you can get them to see what you think. Life-giving communication begins when 2 people are willing to hear and learn from each other. Please know that it is default in our nature to want to interrupt, and a powerful aid that helps me and my clients, even those who struggle with ADHD, to not interrupt is to focus on repeating back to their spouse what they heard them say. So once their spouse finishes speaking, you say, "What I heard you say is," and then once you've shared with them what you heard them say, you ask them if you got it right. When you focus your attention on listening to repeat back, it shifts your brain into learning mode and absorbing mode, and it can help your spouse feel seen and heard. Please note, the goal isn't to repeat word for word what they said, but it's to express back to them the general idea of what they were saying. Let's move to the second sign that indicates your communication skills suck, and it is that you assume. Please note, this is again default in our human DNA to assume. So nothing's wrong with you that you do this. It is just a sign that you have growth work to do. We've all heard that assuming makes an ass out of us, yet we do it all the time and don't even realize it. We typically don't find out we have made an assumption until later when things don't go the way we would like them to have gone. And when a conversation is tension-filled, our tendency to assume is even greater. The more one assumes what they think they know about what their spouse means, what their plans are, or what they will do, the more useless the communication will be. If you want life-giving conversations, you will need to grow your ability to interrupt your own assumptions and ask clarifying questions about everything. If your spouse says they're running to the store and you assume they will remember that earlier that day you asked them to get peanut butter the next time they were at the store, stop yourself and clarify by asking, "Do you remember that I had asked for peanut butter?" It is an act of generosity to both of you As you advocate for what you need and want and respect that your spouse has a lot going on and may not have connected the dots until you ask the clarifying question. The third sign that your communication sucks and needs work is that you speak in absolutes. As humans, we love to control situations to get the results that we want. And one of the ways we do that in our communication is we speak in absolutes. We say things like, you always do this, or you never do this. If we can convince our spouse that they never do what we want them to do, then we can win the battle in proving that they are the problem. The truth is, as humans, there aren't absolutes. Even if your spouse drops their clothes on the floors 9 times out of 10, they don't always drop their clothes on the floor. They often do it. Speaking in absolutes will automatically trigger our spouse's defensiveness, and the conversation cannot produce life. If you want to produce life in a conversation where you are frustrated by something your spouse keeps doing, you're going to need to ask questions. Like if they throw their clothes on the floor and you have repeatedly asked them to hang them up, it is important first to recognize that this is a subconscious choice for them. And it's the best choice they see available to them according to how life occurs to them. They aren't doing this to try and upset you. If you can ask questions, you can learn how the world occurs to them and work together to negotiate something that works for both of you. For example, you might ask them, can you help me understand your thought process when you take your clothes off? What brings you to put them on the floor rather than hang them up? When you ask questions, your spouse doesn't feel attacked, and together you can explore something they likely haven't thought much about. That brings us to the fourth sign that your communication needs work, and it's that you exaggerate. Exaggeration is another common way that we as humans work to control or manipulate conversations with our spouse. When we're in a conversation to prove our point and or be right about what we've decided is true, we will make things bigger than they actually are in hopes that we will leave our spouse speechless and unable to make an opposing argument. We say things like, I have told you 1,000,000 times to whatever. If you do that again, I will lose my mind. Life-giving conversations grow from humbly expressing our feelings and desires and partnering with our spouse to bring it about. For example, I often told my husband that I would lose my mind if he gave me one more of those one-word answers when I ask him questions. I hoped that telling him that I would lose my mind would cause him to see how frustrating his lack of communication was and bring him to want to communicate more. Reality was my threat only gave him more proof that I wasn't mentally stable enough for him to be honest with me. When I realized I was trying to manipulate him, I worked to be honest. And I shared with him that when he gave me one-word responses, I felt lonely and unimportant. I asked him if he could help me understand what made him not want to share more openly and honestly with me. He told me that when he did, I often corrected him or told him that what he shared was wrong. I was in shock because even though I didn't want to admit it, I knew he was right. I asked him to forgive me and committed to work on my ability to hear and listen to his responses, even if they weren't what I wanted to hear. I do work on it, and he's been working on opening up, and our conversations grew to be very life-giving. And these are things we still both get to work on. That brings us to the fifth and final sign that your communication needs work, and it is that you complain versus making a request. Complaining is what we do when we want our spouse to take responsibility for giving us what we want. Complaining kills our brain cells and informs our hippocampus that we are not interested in solving our problems or bringing about our desires. It's easy to think that if we complain, our spouse will do what we want them to do, but it actually creates bitterness and resentment for both people. Life-giving conversations occur when we each take 100% responsibility for what we long for and partner with our spouse through making requests and renegotiating matters to be a win-win for both parties. I often complained about my husband's way of spending money. We literally fought about it for years. Week after week, I complained and both of us grew more bitter and resentful. I finally got sick of my complaining and decided to do something about it. I got honest about what I needed to experience in order to have the financial growth I wanted. I focused only on the things that I actually had control over. For example, I wanted to hire a financial advisor. I wanted to change banks and things like that. I shared what I needed and wanted with my husband, and much to my surprise, he agreed to each of my requests. We turned our financial situation around when I was willing to stop complaining and start taking responsibility for the things I had control over. You really can create life-giving conversations with your spouse where you both feel seen and heard, even if you currently recognize you suck at communication. If you would like me to guide you step by step through growing your ability to produce life-giving conversations in what I have found to be the number one problem that couples face in communication, then you will want the Connection Playbook. You can grow your communication skills today for less than the price of a date night and shift 90% of your conflicts into connection. To access the Connection Playbook, click the link in the description section under this video. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.